Hi. We've already discussed in previous talks why culture in an organisation is so important. As Peter Drucker said, culture will eat strategy for breakfast. So often, even in my own career, I've seen and experienced trying to implement big changes into the organisation, such as the introduction of SAP, and then getting totally frustrated by the lack of progress and success in the rollout. What we failed to recognise was that introducing big management changes requires a change of culture to support them and make them be successful. And many times we didn't do the work necessary to create the culture that would have our strategy really work. And in fact, so often I've seen our clients implement new strategies and seen the culture just trip them up at every stage. As we've asserted, organisation culture is the predominant driver of behaviours that give us the performance we're getting in our organisation. So what do we mean by organisation culture in Alkoomi? First, let me say what it's not. It's not the behaviours and what people say. These are the visible manifestations of culture, and observing them does give us some insights into the culture, but that isn't the culture in itself. So then I hear you ask, so what is culture? At Alkoomi, through experience and research, what we believe organisation culture is, it's the shared relationship people have in their organisation to doing their work. It is this relationship that drives the speaking and behaviours within the organisation at all levels. It's also about relationship. In fact, it's all about relationship. Everything we do in the moment is driven by our current relationship to the world and the people around us and the circumstances of what we're doing. So what I would like to put to you is a couple of insights. First, what we've learned about existing cultures. And second, what could an extraordinary culture look like, particularly around safety and taking care of people? What we've learned about existing safety cultures, I'm going to describe in the next few minutes. And by necessity, because of the time we have, it's going to be a broad generalization. We have carried out hundreds of safety culture surveys. We've done it in different parts of the world, in many diverse industries. We have surveyed tens of thousands of people with our online tool and interviewed many thousands in one-to-one interviews and in group forums. What follows is a generalization. There are many centers of excellence that buck the trend that I'm going to describe. So please hear what I'm about to describe in the context of that generalization, but see what resonates for you. But first, let's talk about the history of safety, if I might. You know, since the early 1800s, we've seen an improvement in safety that looks like this. In fact, I've drawn three curves here. There's millions of them. We implement a change and it has an immediate effect, but that effect flattens out. And that change could be a change in procedures, a change in equipment, a change in systems, and so on. And there are many thousands of those. And they've followed this trend. And when we get to today, we see that even though we're implementing more and more cost and changes in safety, that curve continues to get flatter and flatter. And the effort we have to put in to make change gets greater and greater. And where we look to make those changes is changing in itself. But let's look at our relationship to safety. So when you go back to the 1800s, early 1800s, you could say our relationship to safety was almost non-existent. Break a shovel, get a new shovel. Break a man, get a new man. But that soon changed. People started to object to that relationship. You could talk about unions, you could talk about changes in the law, but what we started to do was build a reactive relationship to safety. When something went wrong, we started to react to it. We'd put a barrier on a machine that cut someone's hand off. We'd put a net under a bridge reconstructing that people are falling off, and so on and so on. The problem with reactive alone as a way of addressing safety is that the cost is very high. Someone once said to me in the rail industry, you know, there's a reason why the book is in red, because it's written in blood. And every lesson in there, every change, someone's paid a high price for. So it's a really valuable document. But so if that wasn't enough, what did we do about that? And our relationship shifted to one of being proactive. Developing systems, procedures, and rules that would prevent what we could foresee happening. And this really got going in the 1950s with people like Deming and the total quality management approach that was being taken. And the more and more detail we put into our procedures and systems, until today it's extremely sophisticated. In fact, the biggest complaint often is that there are too many of those procedures and systems for us to understand them and so on. Let's keep doing it though, because it is making a difference. So what's the relationship we might need to adopt that would take us to the next level and address what's going on down here? And what we say at Alkoomi is what's required is creative. Creating what we want versus putting up with what we get. I mean that in terms of culture. Because when you look at what's going on down here in this gap, it's not about procedures and systems. When I look at what's happening, and I talk to many, many safety professionals, and what they tell me when they investigate and look at what's happening, and when people get hurt or nearly hurt, there was a rule, there was a system, there was a piece of kit that had they, even with its imperfection, if they'd followed that rule or used that kit, they wouldn't have got hurt, or they wouldn't have nearly got hurt. So if it's not about rules and procedures in that gap, what is it? So in those many culture surveys that we've done and people we've spoken to, what have we learned? So when we talk to the workforce, again, please remember this is a generalization. We've stood at the gate of a factory or a site or a workplace and asked everybody going on site, are you going to get hurt today? And you know, right? You know the answer to this. They go, no. And then we ask them a second question. Do you think someone could get hurt here today? And almost 100%, they go, yeah, that's that possibility they could. So kind of not me, someone else. Isn't that how we drive our cars often? Then we ask them, do you believe management when they say all these great things that they say about safety? And, you know, they see on the posters, and they go, yeah, we see it's getting more and more important, but when it really comes to the crunch, no, we don't believe they mean it. Because what they experience, and they tell us they see, that when it really gets down to it, production overrides safety and taking care of people. Then we talk to supervision. And this is really interesting. They go, kind of not on my watch. What do they mean by that? Well, they tell us they ride to work in the same coach in the morning or bus. They've known the people they supervise and work with for many years. They really care about those people on a very personal level. So they're not going to get hurt, not on my watch. But at the same time, they tell us that more and more pressure on them. They're caught between a rock and a hard place of taking care of their people but delivering on production. And the pressures get greater every day as the expectations increase. So we also ask them, do they believe management when they say all the great things they say about safety? And they go, not really, no. Because again, when it comes to the crunch, production comes first. We then talk to people in the office, and they talk about things like work-life balance and well-being. They talk about the increase in their workload and the lowering of resources to get the job done and the raising of expectations, the longer hours to deliver on just what is their basic workload, and how does that affect their work-life balance. They also talk about safety in the workplace, and they go, what has that really got to do with me? You know, I kind of get it. Don't walk up and down the stairs with 4 files, 2 laptops and a cup of coffee. That doesn't work in terms of personal safety. But what has safety at the workplace got to do with me? These are great people trying to do the best job they can, but they often don't see the link between not paying contractors on time and the effect that has on the contractor's relationship to what's happening on site. Not providing materials in the right sequence or on time, or even sometimes putting the cost of material over the quality of the material first. They tell us all these things are going on. And then we talk to safety professionals. They tell you it's more about paper safety every day than real safety. It feels like we're doing things to protect the company from prosecution and to kind of justify what's going on versus really working on keeping people safe. Again, please remember this is a generalization, not everywhere. They say that they're not able to use their expertise and experience to get out there and apply what they call real safety and helping people do things better and safer using that expertise. And then they often tell us they're a bit frustrated that the leadership in the organization don't seem as committed to taking care of people as they are. These are just things that summarize the many things that we've been told. And then we talk to management. And they kind of, if I sum it up like this, they tell us they're caught on the horns of dilemma. They really care about people. You know what, in my career, I've never met a senior manager who does not care about the people that they're managing and leading. Doesn't always show up that way, but I've never met anyone who doesn't. Because why it often doesn't show up that way is because this horns of dilemma, they're taking care of people, but at the same time, they've got to take care of business. And it often shows up like a dichotomy versus being complementary. And then we ask a question of people in organizations, particularly in senior positions. What's acceptable here in terms of the number of people taking days off through stress caused by work or getting injured on the work face? What's acceptable? And they will tell us none. So I ask the question, what do we accept? And you can see a kind of investigation going on inside people's minds in, okay, what do we walk past every day? And what does that tell the organization about what we think is important? What looks too difficult to take on? The conversation at the coffee machine or the water machine that undermines the message. Do we always take those things on, for instance? Nothing wrong here. It's just insights into what might be influencing what we'd really want to be. So let's move on from that. If that is what culture looks like in many organizations, what is the culture we want? So much work has been done to research and understand organization. You can look at people like Edgar Schein and many others who've done a lot of work to identify organization culture. What often is missing is a real good understanding of the culture we really want. Great work on understanding what we've got, but what do we need as a culture that would deliver the results that we're committed to in terms not just of taking care of people and having them go home well and safe every day, but also production and delivery on the business objectives. So we talk about the behaviors we need, but we really seek to create the relationship we need amongst our people that would deliver the behaviors that would deliver the outcomes we're looking for. And how do we have those behaviors become sustainable and habitual through a changed relationship people have to the work they do every day? I think Paul O'Neill put it very well and very simply and succinctly. He took Alcoa from third or fourth in the world in terms of business performance. They were the largest aluminium company, but third or fourth in business performance. He took them from there to being number one in business performance, which is where the board thought they really deserved to be. And after he'd achieved that, he was asked, how did you achieve that? And he said, I did it through the window of safety by asking 3 questions. And the 3 questions were these. If you go out into the organization and ask everybody in the organization, and everyone in the organization says yes to these 3 questions, then no matter what you do, you will be successful, he said. And the first question is, every day, all the time, I'm treated in the organization with dignity and respect. The second question was, all day, every day, I do work that adds meaning to my own life. And the third question was, every day, all day, I feel recognized and acknowledged for the contribution I make. Let's go back and look at those 3 quickly. When we ask the question, are you treated with dignity and respect? When we look at the responses we get, including the anecdotal, what we learn is that there's actually quite a low expectation in here. You know, if I'm not discriminated against, if I'm not bullied, if I'm not intimidated in some way, then I feel I'm treated with dignity and respect. Well, actually, it needs to go further than that. People need to feel that their experience, their expertise is recognized, and they're able to contribute by being asked what is the solution versus being told. Things like that raise levels of dignity and respect. The second in that is adding meaning to my own life. You know, I resonate that with the experience I had recently talking to people who are working on a rail project and in the south of Ireland. And I asked them, what are you doing on this project? And they said, well, we're straightening out the line, we're lengthening the stations, we're making cuttings, we're widening, making 2 tracks, we're improving the signalling system. And then someone said, we're changing the quality of life for people in the south of Ireland and improving the economic ergonomics here. Interesting. The third question is being treated, being recognized and acknowledged for the work you do. In this is not about the special things that are done, but the everyday good work that most people do. I ask the question often of supervision in our consultants talk to our supervision, and they say, what percentage of the time are your people doing a really good job? And they go, and the answer's, 90 to 100%, somewhere in that range. And they go, what percentage of your time do you spend looking for what they're doing wrong? And you can see the light bulb coming on. Because recognizing, acknowledging is not good job this week, guys. See you Monday. It's been much more expansive about what they're doing, the difference it makes, that actually people recognize as being true recognition. The question then, and we'll talk about this in the next talk, is who do I need to be as a leader that would have this kind of culture be true about my organization? I just want to go back to this gap here. Just relying on management systems, procedures and enforcement of those, the policing of that, won't deliver what we describe up above. We need to keep doing those things, but there's something else needed. If you want to know more about what I've been talking about today, do not hesitate to get in touch with us. We would be very happy to discuss how to bring this about in your organization. And let me finish by saying thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing you again on our next talk. Thank you.